I'm Suzanne Giesemann, and I am an author, a speaker, a metaphysical and spiritual teacher, and a medium, which is quite different from my previous career, in which I was a naval officer for 20 years. I retired with the rank of commander and was a commanding officer and aide to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So I served at the highest level of the U.S. military. And my sights were always on that very left brain career, and it served me very well, but I never ever expected to be doing the work I'm doing now, because I was raised with no religion, basically had no spirituality, and so have pretty much experienced a pretty big career shift. I had a very personal wake-up call in the form of a phone call, literally, that we made to my husband's daughter Elizabeth when she caught up with us in Croatia where we were sailing, and let us know that my husband's daughter, my stepdaughter Susan, who was a sergeant in the Marine Corps on active duty, had been crossing the flight line at work when a bolt of lightning came out of the blue and struck her. And medical personnel responded but worked on her for 7 hours, and they couldn't save her. She died along with her 6-month unborn baby. So in just one moment, we lost Susan and her baby. And it wasn't until sometime later that I remembered that Susan had come to me in a dream 2 days before she was killed by that lightning strike. And it was one of those dreams that is so real you don't forget it. Many times when we have dreams, they slip away when you try to tell somebody about it. But to this day, I can see her coming right up to me at a party, getting right in my face and saying, "Suzanne, the baby and I are fine." And it was so real that that morning when we woke up, I said to Ty, we need to get in touch with Susan. Just reach out to her and see how she's doing, because in 2006, when this happened, we didn't have email on the boat. So we made a note to reach out to her, but before we could even get the email to her, she was gone. So I have a knowing in me that that dream was actually a soul visit. It was her way of letting me know that we really are fine, no matter what. But going to her funeral, we flew back, and it was devastating beyond anything I had ever imagined. When I looked at her body in the coffin, it was so different from this vibrant young woman that I had seen only 6 months earlier. It didn't even look like her. And I suddenly had a knowing from what I now know is my soul, but I didn't even know we have souls or our souls at the time, but a knowing that some part of her still exists. And coincidentally, but I know there are no coincidences in this case, I had found a book 6 weeks before she passed about mediumship. And I read it with great interest, but it sounded a little bit far out to me, about an afterlife where people still exist and are communicating with each other and carrying on life like we do here, and I set it aside. But that book now came to mind as I was looking at her body, and I said, I'm going to find a medium, but I'm going to connect with Susan myself. And that very week, I began meditating every day, not just to find peace, which came about as I meditated, but to find Susan. I was a woman on a mission, and I just sat every day and said, "Susan, let me feel you. I know you exist. Let me sense you." And for the first 9 months of meditating, I did not connect with Susan at all, but I started having experiences where I would know things about other people, and I would sense presences that weren't Susan, but I didn't know who it was. Because I'd heard about mediumship, one of my primary goals was to have a reading with a medium, but I didn't have enough trust that there weren't charlatans out there. So I needed to find somebody who I knew was the real deal, who really could connect with those in the spirit world, but also somebody that didn't know me. Because I was so skeptical, I was afraid they might have my last name and Google me and tell me things about Susan that they might find online. So I finally did find someone that didn't know who I was, didn't know my story, and she basically rocked my world. She was an evidence-based medium. She brought through facts about Susan. She brought through her essence. She had my husband and me in tears because there was no mistaking. It was Susan, and she was right here. I knew it in my soul. I could just tell it was her. But to have a medium tell me that this young woman in her 20s who passed suddenly is here in a brown uniform and calling your husband Daddy, and bringing with her a little baby boy who she wants to introduce to you. Well, that was Susan's baby, a little baby boy who she was going to name Liam Tyler. There was no denying in my mind that what my soul knew was true, that she's still here. So I continued my efforts daily to connect with Susan. But meanwhile, I was so awed by that reading, the way it brought instant healing to our family, that I wanted to write a book about mediumship. So I actually ended up writing 2 mediums biographies. One's called The Priest and the Medium, and the other one is Through the Darkness. And while writing the second one, a biography of medium Janet Nohavec, I attended one of her classes on mediumship, strictly to learn how she teaches, because I was writing her story. But she shocked me by calling me to the front of the classroom and saying, "Suzanne, there's a spirit here. You can do this too. What do you sense?" And being put on the spot like that, first of all, my Navy training kicked in. I wanted to run out the door and say, "No, not me, I can't do this." But I trusted that Janet could truly sense a spirit, and she wouldn't put me on the spot like that if she didn't really sense someone there. So I just kind of said, I can do this. And I tuned in, and I didn't see a spirit, but I pulled out various pieces of information about a man in spirit who one of the women in the classes identified as her father, including a man 70 years old who passed of cancer, and he was an engineer. And the woman verified all of that. But I thought I was just pulling data out of the air, until Janet then brought through other evidence about this man, including his hobbies, his birth date. So I thought, you mean there really is somebody here? And she pushed me some more to discern more information. And when I heard that man's nickname, Twinkle Toes, and saw black patent leather shoes like a dancer would wear, and his daughter confirmed he was a ballroom dancer, and my mother always called him Twinkle Toes, that was another turning point for me, because I had never thought that I could bring the kind of healing to others who are in grief like that medium brought to our family. But once that door opened, I just jumped right through and said, let's do this. Let's see how much evidence we can get through. And that's what I've dedicated myself to over the years, to the point where now I feel them, I sense them so beautifully. We have 2-way, real-time, live, interactive conversations. And my main goal is showing people, what does this mean if we can tune into those who have passed? What does it mean about us and who we are as souls? What does it do for our lives here, and how can we live better lives as a result of knowing that? I was never afraid of people thinking I was crazy or delusional. I simply didn't want people to look down at me because I talked to those who have passed. That's just human nature, to want to be respected. But I could see from the very beginning how incredibly healing and helpful this work is. So I knew that the opportunity to help others was so much more important than anybody thinking that I was silly for pursuing this work. That took precedence. And I'm very grateful that I was trained by Janet Nohavec and another evidence-based medium, Mavis Patilla. They mirrored what I always wanted to show from day one when I realized I could connect with those across the veil, and that is a standard of receiving evidence from those who have passed. In other words, information about their lives that the medium could not possibly know, so that those who are skeptical can say, well, how did they know that? Well, it must be coming from my loved one. So evidence to me is paramount. It's the most important thing, because not everybody immediately accepts that the spirit world is real. And there are so many things that come through that you can't make up, that nobody else would know, that you can't find online. And that dispels this very human nature to question and to be worried about being duped. So the evidence is so important because then it backs up the messages from those across the veil, what they really want to convey to us that we can't validate. Messages like, I love you so much and I'm okay. Or I'm sorry for this incident in our life together. I want to apologize for that. The messages are the main point of mediumship, but the evidence provides the validation. And I would love to be giving messages to people all the time when I meet them, when they find out that I can connect with those who have passed. Of course, we want to hear from our loved ones, but I think the spirit world deliberately puts a veil down when I'm not working so that I don't sense spirits around all the time, and I see that as a blessing. But when I set an intention to make a connection and I sit with somebody to do a reading, I sense them immediately. I ask them to step in, and I know it's the motivation that helps that connection. The motivation is always to provide healing and comfort and to serve those across the veil. So with that as the intention and setting the perfect timing and setting to make a connection, we usually have a beautiful, beautiful session in which my clients sit there and say, oh my God, that's them. And they start crying and say they're still here because it's undeniable. So when I connect, even after 15 years of connecting with those across the veil, I still don't see their faces. I can't describe them enough to say, oh, this is your grandmother and she had blonde curly hair and a small nose. But I feel that that's actually being held back from me so that it requires me to truly feel their personality. I can drill down into character traits so specifically that the people do say, oh my gosh, you've nailed them. That's them to a T. So I feel their personality and then I hear their conversations with me. They'll put song lyrics in my mind. I'll hear sounds that are significant. One of the most evidential things that comes through in a reading is I feel the physical symptoms from the way people passed. And often I feel like a human pincushion because I'll get a pain in my kidney and I know that they had a kidney stone at some point. Or one man gave me a piercing pain in my left eye and he told me that he was affected by something in his childhood for his whole life. And his wife validated that he'd been shot in the eye with a BB and blinded in that eye. Or my heart will palpitate if they pass from a heart attack. So to me, that's a sign of how those across the veil can manipulate our energy fields to get a point across. And I do see a lot of images, I just don't see the spirits themselves. I see what looks like charades and they'll make certain gestures and my clients will say, oh, they used to do exactly that. So it's a very full experience of all of the senses at once to create layers of depth that leave no doubt in people's mind that we are having a real life conversation with their loved one who is not dead and gone. Which brings up one of my favorite parts of a reading is when those across the veil tell me current events about my clients' lives. They talk about things that they're doing now, challenges they're facing now, that show we're still part of your life. You're not moving on without us. We're moving on together. It's been very interesting talking to so many souls to find out that there are many similarities in the death process, and yet there are differences, just like all of us are different. So depending on how someone died and also how aware they were of the greater reality before they passed will change their experience when they passed. So if there's a sudden passing from someone who didn't know there's an afterlife, in many cases there's a bit of confusion, but they're met by loving guides and loved ones who have passed before them and reassured that all is well. And they can see their loved ones who are still here in physical form and are aware that they've had some kind of a transition. In every case of the readings I've done, where someone passed suddenly and often painfully, they tell me that they didn't suffer. And I see a symbol. I see them do this charade, which means my soul launched out of the body before I felt any pain, which is very reassuring for those whose loved ones passed in a car accident or a fire. So even though the body may react in pain, the soul dissociates so that there's no emotional pain. And those who pass in hospice or who are unconscious for a while, there is a separation process where the soul starts interacting already across the veil. And many hospice workers will talk about loved ones here that start reaching out for family members in the room because they really do come to take us home. I did a reading for a woman whose uncle came in from across the veil and was with her dad across the veil. I didn't know who she had who had died, but her uncle and her dad were two of those. And the uncle said, "I reached across and took your father home." And my client burst into tears because she said, when my dad was dying, I reached out to my uncle in spirit and said, "Please help Dad across the veil." And he validated that in the reading. So once they get across the veil, depending on how they passed and how awakened spiritually they were, some people go to a healing type environment. I see that often in cases of people who complete suicide, surrounded by loving beings who help them adjust and understand how to process the events of the life they just finished. But others, like a dear friend of mine, Brenda, were just immediately visiting loved ones back here and trying to let them know that she had crossed and she was fine. And then, well, that's a whole other topic about what they do across the veil. But basically, we continue creating our reality through consciousness. And we can create homes for ourselves. We meet with our loved ones. Some people study, some create music. Some people get to do activities that they always wanted to do here but never got to do. One of my favorite examples was when one of my clients asked me to ask her husband in spirit, who we were connecting with, "What is my husband doing across the veil?" So I asked him, and I said, "This is funny." He says, "I'm standing firmly on 2 feet and I'm playing golf every day." And she said, "Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, because golf was his passion, but he had one of his legs amputated before he died and he couldn't golf anymore." So again, the evidence. I didn't have any way of knowing that, but from across the veil, he showed he's now created a healthy body for himself with 2 legs that we really don't need across the veil, but he was going to play golf until he didn't need that stimulation anymore. So the best way to understand what we call the afterlife and my spirit guides call the everlife is that it operates under a different rule set than we do here. Here we have to abide by the law of gravity, and we have time, and cause and effect takes time to see the results of our actions and our thoughts. But across the veil, we instantly create with our thoughts. If you want to visit a loved one who's still here in form, you're instantly with them and seeing what they're up to and feeling their presence. Those across the veil have told me repeatedly, it's just the blink of an eye till we'll be together again. So to understand that better, just think about your dreams. There's really no sense of time in your dreams. Everything happens at once, and you want to go visit Paris, you're instantly in Paris. That's what it's like across the veil. And one of the first lessons I learned is that those across the veil always hear us when we think about them and when we call out to them. So I started 15 years ago saying, talk to them, they hear you. So talk to them even if you don't hear them back. We can all learn to sense our loved ones, and this is my main goal these days, is to teach people how to connect yourself, how to sense your loved ones, how to sense the many ways that they get signs through to us. But in the meantime, it's a wonderful practice to write them a letter and know that even as you write the words, they are literally standing over your shoulder, watching you write, hearing your words, comforting you. So that's a really great way to hold the connection in your heart. But just know that because literally your energetic fields were entangled with each other for whatever time you had together, you are eternally entangled. So this is an energetic connection They're not far away in some distant place. They're part of the same field of consciousness that you are. So just thinking of them activates that connection energetically, and they think of you. One way I like to think of this is, imagine you're sitting on a couch in the living room with your family, and one person's watching TV, the other person's reading, and somebody's talking on the phone. You're not paying attention to each other, yet you're aware of each other's presence. But suddenly you turn to the person beside you and you say, hey, what do you think about what's going on here? They'll stop what they're doing and engage you. It's just like that in the spirit world. They're still part of your family or your friendship, but you just get their attention and now you have it. So converse with them. And conversely, they often will put thoughts in our mind or cause us to do things and we think they're our own thoughts, like turn on the radio now. So you think, oh, I think I'll turn on the radio, and you turn it on and there's their song playing. They made that connection. That's one of the ways they connect with us, is through our thoughts, but so often they sound like our own, we don't realize it. And one of the best ways that those across the veil make their presence known is through signs and synchronicities, timing of events and the actual events themselves that we cannot deny. For example, the very first time that Susan really got my attention was turning on a television in a room of a hotel where I was sitting on the balcony reading about the other side. It turned on by itself, just as I was reading in the book that those across the veil can manipulate electrical devices to get our attention. So the timing and the actual activity were meaningful. And one of the keys to recognizing that they're a sign is understanding how signs work. Once you become aware that those in spirit can manipulate electricity, such as flickering lights, they can merge their consciousness with birds and animals and insects to get them, like remote control, to get our attention. Once you notice these things and notice how they work, you'll pay attention. And that's when you move your awareness to the heart and you say, is that just a butterfly flying past, or is that a specific sign for me? Many times we'll see butterflies and we'll think of Susan, but we know it's just a butterfly. But when she first got our attention with a butterfly, I had been asking to sense her, and a butterfly came from my left side, flew around me in a complete circle, flew into my heart, flew 50 yards down the hiking trail to my husband, flew around him in a circle, hit him in the heart, and flew away. There was no denying at that point that was a sign. And at the time, I had no idea that those in spirit can actually manipulate other beings. But now that I know that, I recognize the signs. So what else do? They catch our attention with literally signs on billboards or license plates. They're the ones that ask you to turn and look right now, but we don't realize again that we're being impressed upon by their consciousness. So one thing is noticing the signs, believing that they can do it, and then noticing how our human minds tend to talk us out of these things. But how do you know it's not your imagination? It comes with a knowing in the heart, oh my God, that's my loved one. There's always a little feeling if it's like just a butterfly, well, I really know that's not them. That's just a random event. But when it's an actual connection, you feel it in your heart. It has an energy to it that's very specific. So if you're being bombarded with many signs at once and you're noticing them, it's very likely that someone across the veil is trying to get your attention. But if you're not acting on the signs, if you're not responding with a sense of trust, they might get a little frustrated with you and stop the signs. So act on, if you have a nudge to do something, if you have an intuitive hit, act on it if it's helpful. Never do anything that might be harmful, and see where that leads. And you'll start to get the feel of how the dots connect. But some people are afraid of what they call trickster spirits. How do you know you're not being duped? How do you know this is your loved one? And I tell them, we cannot ever know for certain until we're so-called face-to-face in the spirit world. So the big question is it helpful? Is it healing? That's what matters. And in every case of every connection I've made, that's what the answer is. Yes, it is comforting, it's healing, and there is that knowing in our soul, this is our loved one, this is real. So I tell people to simply affirm, only the highest possible beings are allowed into my awareness, and if anything comes to me that's frightening, I'll send it love, because the darkness can't handle the light. It can't exist in the light of love and higher consciousness. So that's been my experience, and I tell people, if something scary happens to you, face it. Don't run from it, and it dissolves. I remember when I first started down this path, I met up with my spirit guide before I ever connected with Susan, and that really pushed my buttons. My military mind did not want to believe in spirit guides, but I was hearing him very clearly. I was connecting with other people's loved ones before I even connected with Susan. So I started doing readings for people, and my guide would drop in on the readings and tell me things about the client that were accurate. And I learned to trust that he was very much present with me. And then I had many personal experiences of even seeing his form, kind of like the blue light you'd see, the blue flame on a gas stove. And it danced around. I saw it objectively. And our guides want us to know that they don't necessarily have human form. They are fields of consciousness just like we are, but they have the bigger picture as well. And their job is to help make your life here easier. So once I realized that and accepted that they're real, I started asking for their help. And it's true, they really do help life flow. There's a big difference between guides and guardian angels in that guardian angels will step in when you're about to go off your life path. I remember driving down a road and didn't realize there was a stop sign and hearing a very loud stop and slammed the brakes on just before I would have been hit by a car. So was that a guide or a guardian angel? In that case, likely a guardian angel. But sometimes it doesn't matter if it's our loved one across the veil, if it's a guide, or if it's an angel. Is it helpful? Then use it. And we don't always have to ask for assistance from our guides. They're offering it all the time through our intuition and through events that just come together. They help orchestrate events to help make our lives flow more easily. But the very fact of asking for help shows that we are acknowledging that help is available, shows that we recognize we don't have to do everything by ourselves, and it shows that we are trusting something higher than ourselves. So it's part of the process and part of our own growth to work with them consciously. And the greatest gift for me of this whole path after Susan's passing and discovering the everlife, as my guides call it, is to come to know that we are souls now. We don't become souls when we pass. We are souls who chose to have an incarnation in this physical reality as human beings, and that it's the soul of us that never dies, that is already whole and complete. And I discovered that actually through the meditation process. When you can shut out what I call the story of you and find the part of you that never changes, you realize this is the soul. And this soul can become a witness to your story and find peace here and now. So we don't have to die to go to heaven. We can create a state of contentment and bliss right here, no matter what's going on. And that comes from the soul. I deliberately wore this ring today because it reminds me of who we are. It's called a story ring, where the part on my finger doesn't move, but there's a part in the middle that moves around like our story. To me, the ring itself is like the soul, and we are temporarily living a story as a human being. But when we can find that part of us that never changes, that is eternal, that's a game changer, because that means we can find peace and wholeness here and now, and that's what most people are lacking. So I've learned this from so many souls, most importantly from a young man named Wolf, that was his nickname, who proved to me that we are souls here and now, that we're part of one big web connecting all that is. And when we can live in awareness of that, that's what we call awakened living. So I have learned to trust that we have help from higher dimensions so fully that I often say, you know, okay, make me your puppet on a string. Pull my strings, because the outcome is so much better when I stop trying to do things by myself. So there's a phrase, a biblical phrase from somebody who was not raised with religion that says, "Thy will be done." And I say that often, you know, pull my strings, thy will be done. What do I do next? You can ask that question and be guided moment by moment. It makes life so much easier. I no longer keep a to-do list. I don't worry about all the tasks I have to do, because moment by moment, I sense what's in the best interest of my path and those around me. I never had that kind of connection before, but it's truly possible, and life will really flow when we stop feeling we have to do it ourselves. You have a team of helpers. Grief is nothing I would wish on anyone, but it is one of the greatest catalysts to growth that we as humans can experience. And fortunately, it comes in waves. So in those moments when we're not in the troughs, in the depths of grief, there is a part of us that gets through in our awareness that there is something better than this. Our human bodies are wired to go beyond the pain. And so that pain actually pushes us to seek answers, to seek relief. So when we embrace our grief and realize that it's a sign that we truly love deeply, it actually comes with hidden blessings. And as souls, we knew we would suffer great grief, and we knew we would suffer great joy. So when we can just say, I don't like this, I would prefer this weren't happening, but what can I do with this pain to make this a better place? Then we've made something good come of our grief. So I would say, feel it fully, ride the waves, but trust that those you are grieving are still here, and use those moments when you're not bogged down by the literally physical pain and the emotional pain of grief to make that connection yourself. Start talking to your loved ones, spend time in the stillness, and start asking for guides to help you see through your pain and see through the veil. And with commitment and belief and trust that what your soul is trying to tell you, you will make a connection. So those across the veil are working very hard to let us know they're here, to alleviate our pain. And that's what mediumship and after-death communications from our own loved ones help us to do, to realize we're not alone, that death is not the end. So when we look for the signs, when we start doing what I call the 3 E's, practicing the 3 E's, educating ourselves about the greater reality, such as videos like this, and then experiencing for yourself through meditative states or noticing the signs. And then the 3rd E is engaging higher consciousness by talking to your loved ones, talking to your guides. This becomes a process that builds upon itself and reveals another world that we're often not even aware is right here. This reality is so much more malleable than we realize, because those in spirit, when they really want to get our attention, can play with the rules of gravity and time. And we experience what we call miracles, but it's just the parting of the veil a little bit. I've had many people tell me stories of physical objects appearing where they were not just minutes before, and they say that's impossible. Or I had 3 women riding down the road, had asked for protection around their car on the journey they were on, when a big boulder came out of a truck in front of them. It was coming straight at their windshield, but all of a sudden it broke into pieces and went down around the car. That we'd call a miracle. I just say that's evidence that this reality is malleable. So is it a simulation? Is it like a dream? It's definitely like a dream, because I know when we pass from these bodies, we look back and say, oh my gosh, it was so real. And it is real while we're in it. anything that can be created in consciousness is real. When we have a shared experience, we call that reality. But anything we experience, even in our dreams, is real. So we appreciate this reality for what it has to teach us, but when you come to know it's not the only reality, it is like a simulation. And I heard a teacher named Donald Hoffman say that meditation is like taking off the headset and shifting to another program. But I remember meeting a scientist one time who told me that she could understand that I was a Navy commander, but she could not accept mediumship. And I said to her, well, as a scientist, you understand frequencies. She said, yes. And I said, well, what a medium is doing is tuning into higher frequencies that our technology at this time doesn't allow us to sense. So scientists may be disappointed because they want replicable experiments where they can every time bring through the same results. But I say that we need to be testing mediumship like we test evidence in a court of law, where the preponderance of evidence will send somebody to jail for life or take away their life. We trust evidence, and we've been getting evidence from mediums for over 100 years, but our human skeptical brains tend to dismiss that. Happily, we're getting more and more sensitive equipment now that can sense energy fields. All beings, all that exists, has this energetic field. It's all fields of energy and information, and that's what a medium is tapping into. That's what all of us feel when we interact with each other. We all know when we resonate with someone. You meet somebody at a partner, you either turn the other way or engage in conversation. That's an energetic interaction. Scientists know that a lot of this is real, but they're afraid to embrace it. So I look forward to the day when our technology shows what mediums have been tapping into for over a century. And what I appreciate about meditation is that, having come from a very left brain career, meaning I focus on left hemisphere of the brain activities like analyzing, categorizing, judging, putting details into place, meditation has allowed me to dampen those activities and bring the right brain state of flow online to create a state of whole brain experiences in meditation where you flow with what is and you don't have to analyze everything. That is what helps us make the best connection across the veil, because really the veil is this physical body. The brain filters out the frequencies that are all around us. I like to use the example of the fact that when we watch something on a television screen, the people we're watching on the screen are not in there. That is just an instrument that displays a signal. This body is an instrument that displays our soul's signal or frequency. So if we were to smash the TV screen, the signal that was playing through it still exists, is still playing. We just need another instrument. But if this body breaks, just like the TV signal, our soul's energetic frequency does not go anywhere. It exists right here for all eternity. As my guides have told me many times, there is only here in consciousness. We are fields of energy and information. When the body, the instrument dies, the signal continues. So the nature of this reality is duality and paradox. We say that we live in two worlds, the physical world and the spirit world, but actually it's one world, just different octaves of frequency that we're experiencing. So there's constant interaction between the two worlds. Here we live in a world of opposites and duality, but our soul is already whole. So we feel separate from each other, and yet we are also connected. So the nature of reality is we are both human and spirit. We are separate from each other and interconnected. We are separate in awareness, and yet there's a greater part of us that knows who we are. So the beauty of living the awakened way is coming to see the dual nature and the paradox and embracing it. Embracing that there are things we'll never know while we're in these physical bodies. That's the mystery. And yet, when we learn to shift our consciousness, we can tap into our higher nature and learn more than we can when we live in a restricted sense. So it's just this constant, what I call a dance of consciousness, learning that we're not stuck in this restricted state. We are human and spacious, aware beings as souls. That's something I never knew before I started down this path. And so I suffered, and I felt empty a lot. There was always an aching and a longing for something more. But now I know that that wholeness is who we really are. And you simply make that shift to this space that you can discover for yourself in meditation, that state of wholeness, tap into greater insights, and bring that awareness back into this challenging life of duality, and it changes everything. We absolutely attract to ourselves what we need for our soul's growth. So when we see that we're attracting to ourselves through our own energy field what's going to help us on our soul's path, then we learn to work on ourselves instead of trying to change other people. And one of the things that I've learned from both friends who have passed and from my guides is that all human beings are wounded. We all carry trauma. We all carry shame and guilt and grief. But that those across the veil understand human nature and never judge us. They love us unconditionally. They see past our faults and want nothing more than for us to love ourselves the way they love us. So knowing that we're not judged and knowing that we all make mistakes, one of the greatest lessons is that we make mistakes because we don't realize who we are. So as you come through this work and through the spiritual path to realize we've always been whole as souls, you work on your own wounds, they're healed, and you find the love that's already in here. So for anybody who doesn't feel worthy, I ask you to ask your guides to help you see yourself as they do, to parent yourself with unconditional love, even if you had parents who didn't know how to do that. So to begin to talk to yourself in a loving way, even if it requires role playing, is one of the best first steps you can make. And I've learned that this is a process and that we can seek perfection, but we'll never get there. And so when we can be satisfied with where we are right now and realize that it just keeps getting better, that to me is exciting and allows us to embrace our challenges and say, okay, what am I going to do with this? How could it get better than this? In many cases, it can get a lot better, but there will never be total peace and happiness. This life is about the ups and downs. I feel that we came here to master surfing the waves of the ups and downs of life. The waves will always be here. The goal is to not be swamped by them anymore. So you are a human being with all of its faults and good parts and a soul right here and now. So the spiritual path is about shifting your identity and then living a consciously connected and divinely guided life. And I have found that it's so important to have a daily practice of sitting in stillness, or even just if you can't meditate, which is just like a bad word to some people, get out in nature and have a period of contemplation when you're focused on something greater than yourself. Because it is just way too easy to get caught up in the human drama and to think you're only human. Now that I've felt the greater reality and come to know we are souls, there's no going back. But I catch myself every day in human mode. And it's that contrast between the beautiful, loving sense that comes from soul awareness versus our sense of separation and it's all about me that leads to chaos in our human world that pushes me to sit daily, no matter what, for at least just a few minutes and affirm that connection of who we really are. So I have multiple practices, such as my 3-minute sip of the divine, where that stands for sit in peace. If everybody would just sit quietly for 3 minutes and notice the thoughts, just a practice of noticing the random and unhelpful thoughts that go through our minds, you'd start to find that stillness in yourself. And in that stillness, you can ask a question such as, what do I need to know right now? Or why am I having this challenge? And as you sit and simply listen, you'll start to get answers. So a practice like that will change your life. And I've found that even when I'm on vacation, it's absolutely critical to spend a few minutes a day in stillness with the intention of achieving an expanded state of awareness and affirming who I am and that I'm not alone. That keeps me in balance and helps me remember who I am and why I'm here. That kind of practice would change our world. I feel that there's an epidemic of emptiness in this world. Many people are depressed, suicidal, turning to drugs and alcohol and other addictions, and that's trying to fill this emptiness, because even though we're more connected than ever, technologically, we feel more separated than ever before. And that's because we don't realize who we really are. We are just not aware that we are souls and we have all this help that's available. So many people do silly human things to fill this emptiness that they feel inside. But once in meditation or other spiritual practices, you come to experience our true nature of interconnectedness, and you realize that the love we're looking for outside ourselves is really here, you understand that heaven really isn't a place, it is a state of being, and it's right here. But it doesn't mean that once you have this realization, your life is perfect and you walk around in a state of bliss all the time. Don't I wish? But once you've tasted it here in this physical body, you know it's part of you. It's always on, already here, and it's accessible. And that's when you sense what true oneness is. It's a sense of interconnection. And by the way, when something can't be separated, when there is no separation, that's my definition for love. So that's why the spiritual path leads to greater awareness that we are here to be the expression of love, that we're here to love each other. Because once you take away the stories, suddenly you understand each other and you feel that connection at a soul level. There are times when I can't contain the love I feel for other people, even if I've never met them. It just wants to overflow. That's our natural state, and that's oneness. And it's why in examples of natural disasters or unnatural disasters where many people lose their physical lives, other people come out to help. Our true nature shows itself in acts of altruism and kindness and compassion. That part of us is always here. That's oneness. And that's what this path leads to. Again, it's not linear. It's an ongoing process. You are this beautiful instrument that is playing your soul's tone. And awakening is not a single event. It's a moment by moment tuning the instrument. And when we live amongst other people who are out of tune, we get out of tune very easily. So every choice you make, every thought, you become aware of it. You practice presence and say, am I playing in tune with my soul's song? And your ringtone becomes ever more sweet when you do that. So people talk about the veil between the physical world and the non-physical world becoming thinner, and I know this is true. The veil is really just an energetic vibration that keeps us from sensing what is right here. It's not out there. So as more people come to realize who we are, as more people fine-tune their instrument, as more people focus on love and the soul's true nature, that energy adds to the whole. There is actually an energy field of all of humanity, and it is growing higher. as each person turns up their own light. It's like a dimmer switch, that it could be kind of dim right now, but as each person awakens to their true nature and turns up their own light, the overall light gets brighter. And that's why more people are accepting mediumship, more people are spending time meditating, more people are focusing on their inner life as well as the human life here. And as more and more of us do that, we will find less chaos in our world. So it's coming to see this life as this grand tapestry, and every one of us is adding the threads of our consciousness to it. Underneath a tapestry, all you see are the threads, and it looks like chaos. But when we can shift our focus like our guides and loved ones who have passed do, and see it from the other side, there you see the patterns, there you see the beauty, even in the dark and the light. So hopefully that brings hope to anybody that comes to realize we're not alone, we are one thread in a tapestry. And when we can change our patterns and see the greater patterns, then we see the wholeness. So for over a decade now, I sit in meditation every morning and connect with my guides, and they give me a daily inspirational message. And these messages are so filled with love because they come from the higher dimensions where all we know is love, which again is lack of separation. This total connection with each other and with all that is. And every one of those daily messages ends with the same phrase, "You are so very loved." Some people hear that and they just think, oh, that's ridiculous. I have a friend who heard that and she just brushed it off because she couldn't love herself. But over time, as she has educated herself and experienced for herself the greater reality and engages her guides and her loved ones, she's found that love within herself and now embraces that phrase, "You are so very loved." So again, if we can parent ourselves like our guides and our loved ones are trying to love us unconditionally and come to know that love really is the answer, we realize realistically in this reality, we can't instantly heal our world, but one soul at a time, we can heal from the inside out, and that's the goal.